Movies have the ability to make us laugh, cry, and cheer at certain points in time, but there are also times when they fail to provide the desired results. Additionally, not even the slightest bit inaccurate. The rewriting of history, the rejecting of scientific conclusions, and the stretching of facts like taffy are all topics that we are debating in the sake of drama. Hollywood has a propensity for bending the truth, and sometimes completely shattering it. Be it a sword that wouldn't exist for another 600 years, or an improper uniform. Hollywood has a tendency to distort the facts. A good example of this would be the movie Forrest Gump. When Forrest reaches a certain point in time, he suddenly decides to quit running in the Monument Valley and decides to go back to his house. Despite the fact that this is an excellent and amazing article, there is one problem with writing it. In the process of beginning his jog toward the west, he travels away from Alabama. Let me apologize. The realization that they had made a mistake led them to the conclusion that it was appropriate to include that well-known clip in the final cut. Furthermore, this is just the beginning of the process. There are 66 mistakes that have been done by Hollywood business that are so shocking, hilarious, and eyebrow-raising that they assumed you would never find out about them. Gladiator. Emperor Commodus did not murder his father, Marcus Aurelius. Commodus is seen in the film as suffocating Marcus Aurelius in order to get to the throne. In actuality, Marcus Aurelius passed away due to natural causes in the year 180 AD when he was engaged in a military adventure. The assertion of patricide is not supported by any evidence. It is true that Commodus became emperor, but he did so by succession. This is presented in a different way in the movie for dramatic impact and to further demonize Commodus. In spite of the fact that he was vain and unpredictable, historians do not consider Commodus to be a usurper by murder. Due to this alteration, the heritage of both the father and the son is distorted. However, it is not true in terms of history, but it does provide emotional weight to Maximus's vengeance narrative. It was believed that Marcus Aurelius was a philosopher king, and it is probable that he passed away due to sickness. In order to motivate the antagonist and hold the audience's attention, the patricide element was included. The Patriot. Error. British troops are shown burning a church full of civilians. A significant image depicts British forces enclosing residents inside of a church and then setting it on fire. Regarding the American Revolutionary War, there is no evidence of such an occurrence happening. It is more comparable to the horrors committed by the Nazis during World War II than it is to the behavior of the British in the 18th century. Some people believe that the movie unjustly portrays British soldiers as villains. There is no evidence that General Cornwallis, who is represented in the movie, committed any war crimes. Propaganda throughout the war served as the impetus for the event, rather than historical evidence. This incident has been regarded as pure fiction by historians. A role that Mel Gibson played was inspired, to a certain extent, on Francis Marion's The Swamp Fox. A complicated and contentious record may be found in Marion's real-world existence. This fictitious situation evokes strong emotions. However, it is not accurate in depicting historical behavior. A Beautiful Mind. Error. John Nash's hallucinations were dramatized inaccurately. Throughout the course of the movie, Nash is shown engaging with intense visual hallucinations. In point of fact, Nash's symptoms of hallucination were predominantly oral rather than visual. He was able to hear voices, but he did not see individuals as shown in the movie. Characters such as Charles and Parcher were constructed from a variety of sources. For the sake of clarity in narration, the film modifies symptoms. This gives viewers the wrong impression about the usual signs of schizophrenia. During his time working for the Pentagon, Nash never participated in any covert operations. His scientific accomplishments in mathematics and his awarding of the Nobel Prize are both authentic. Both Nash and his wife, Alicia, were in favor of the dramatization in order to better understand the audience. While the performance was acclaimed by critics, there were certain misconceptions about mental health. 300. Error. The Spartans weren't alone at Thermopylae. There's a scene in the movie in which 300 Spartans are able to fend off the Persian army by themselves. In point of fact, around 7,000 Greek warriors from a variety of city-states joined them. In the vicinity of The Last Stand, the number reduced to around 1,500. The group that King Leonidas commanded was not only comprised of Spartans. The film does not include Thebans, Thespians, or any other individuals who fought. Despite their status as exceptional, the 300 Spartans were not solitary heroes. Both the dramatic storyline and the visual spectacle are served by the absence. The narrative is recounted from a Spartan point of view, which is subjective. However, Thermopylae was more of a communal sign than it was revealed to be. As opposed to strictly following history, the hyper-stylized style of film favors myth. Pocahontas. Error. Pocahontas was too young for a romantic relationship with John Smith. Pocahontas and John Smith are shown in the film as having a romantic relationship. During the time period in question, Pocahontas was around 10 to 12 years old. About 27 years old at the time John Smith was. It was a fictional love connection that was created for the purpose of appealing to Disney. Despite the fact that Smith's works romanticize their relationship, they are not proven. Instead of marrying Smith, Pocahontas eventually wed John Rolfe. Alterations are also made to cultural practices and chronology in the film. Some believe that it oversimplifies and misrepresents the history of Native Americans. Later on, Disney admitted that they had taken some creative liberties with the plot. The historical truth was more complicated and loaded with politics. Shakespeare in Love. Error. Queen Elizabeth I is shown attending public theater performances. Within the video, Elizabeth I is shown sitting in the pit and watching Shakespeare's play. The Queen, in point of fact, attended concerts that took place in secret court settings. According to royal etiquette, it was forbidden for kings to interact with commoners in public. Shakespeare did have Elizabeth I's assistance, although she did it from a distance. In addition to adding drama, the sequence also lends approval to the romantic plotline. While historically wrong, it provides viewers with a rewarding emotional experience. There is no evidence that she directly interfered in censorship negotiations. In film, fiction and actual literal history are mixed together. In spite of the inaccuracy, Judi Dench's performance received plaudits from the critics. Rather of being a historical biography, it is a theatrical dream. Pearl Harbor. Error. Japanese planes bomb a hospital. No such civilian target was attacked. The film depicts bombs landing on a military hospital in the United States during the assault on Pearl Harbor. In point of fact, Japanese aircraft were primarily aimed against military targets such as ships, airfields, and bases. Although there were losses among civilians, hospitals were not the intended targets of the attack. The film exaggerates the tragedy in order to heighten the emotional impact. On the contrary, this presentation gives the impression of war crimes. Although they did react bravely, the real medical professionals did not do so under direct air bombardment. Rather than being inserted for accuracy, the sequence was added for dramatic pace. The majority of the strike was directed against naval stations in the United States. For the sake of romance and tragedy, the film exaggerates it. Historiographers have voiced their disapproval of the distorted military facts. Argo. Error. Canada's role in the Iran hostage rescue was downplayed. Argo presents the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, as the perpetrator of the Canadian caper. Despite appearances, Canada played a considerably more significant role than was depicted. American citizens were protected for a period of time by Ambassador Ken Taylor and his team. Documents were falsified, safe shelters were provided, and Canadians coordinated their efforts with their friends. The participation of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, came later and was centered on the logistics of exfiltration. Rather of praising Canadian valor, the film gives credit to the cleverness of the CIA. After some time had passed, Ben Affleck admitted to downplaying Canada's contribution. This distortion led to confusion and irritation among Canada's diplomatic community. It was at this period that Taylor was regarded as a hero. The narrative of the United States is distorted by the drama of the film. The Last Samurai. Error. Tom Cruise's character is fictional. No American fought in the Satsuma Rebellion. The character of Nathan Algren, played by Tom Cruise, is a roughly inspired version of Jules Brunet. Brunet did not come from the United States. He was French and participated in past fights with Japan. No American participated in the actual Satsuma Rebellion that took place in 1877. There is a romanticizing of the decline of the samurai class in the film. This results in the condensing of time frames and the creation of fictitious political reasons. It is intended that Algren's journey will be a redemption arc for an outsider. The tale was referred to as a white savior by critics. Although the film's images and emotions are strong, they are not based on any facts. In addition to the devastating loss, Japan's modernization was a complicated process. However, it inspired interest in the history of samurai all across the world. Marie Antoinette. Error. Converse sneakers appear in one scene. Anachronistic fashion. The film Marie Antoinette, directed by Sofia Coppola, has a sequence in which Converse sneakers are brought into view. As part of a shoe montage, they make a fleeting appearance amid outfits from the 18th century. This was done on purpose. Coppola employed contemporary features to bridge the gap between different periods. During the early part of the 20th century, Converse All-Stars were first introduced. Obviously, they did not exist in France at the time of Marie Antoinette in the 1700s. It was not a mistake. Rather, the decision was creative. The film's ability to mix elements of popular culture and historical context is reflected in this. Postmodernism may be used to describe music, language, and fashion. The courageous decision was praised by some viewers, while others condemned it as being reckless. The anachronism was not a result of chance, rather it was intentional and meaningful. 10,000 BC. Error. Shows woolly mammoths helping build the pyramids. Impossible. The movie depicts a society like that of Egypt, and it has woolly mammoths. It is estimated that woolly mammoths were extinct around 4,000 years ago in some locations. Around the year 2500 BC, the pyramids of Egypt were constructed. In terms of time, the difference is more than 5,000 years. The usage of mammoths for building by humans is not supported by any evidence. The pyramids of ancient Egypt were constructed by workmen utilizing human tools and technical processes. In addition, the film makes a mistake attempt to mix the civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and tribal groups. Each of these three categories, geography, technology, and species, is out of date. In most areas, the year 10,000 BC was still considered to be a pre-urban hunter-gatherer age. Despite the fact that it is visually appealing, the storyline ignores fundamental archaeological realities. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Error. Nazis are shown burning books in 1938. Real events happened in 1933. During the course of his 1938 quest, Indy is seen in the movie witnessing Nazi book burnings. During the month of May in 1933, the Nazis burned a significant number of books. These were early attempts to regulate ideology and repress dissent, and they were part of those efforts. Censorship continued until 1938, although there were no further instances of mass burnings. There is a misplacement of the date, but the scenario adds a Nazi dread. Although it is symbolic, the timing is not quite right. For the year 1938, Nazi Germany was not holding bonfires, rather they were preparing for war. One of the first forms of propaganda that Hitler used was the burning of books. The sequence, albeit having an erroneous timing, contributes to the dramatization of fascist rule. For the sake of creating cinematic suspense, Spielberg's film muddles historical time frames. Saving Private Ryan. Error. Shows a motorcycle model not built until after World War II. An example of a post-war type motorbike is shown being ridden by a soldier in one of the scenes. It has been determined by specialists to be a Czechoslovak CZ-125 manufactured during 1946. The events of the film take place in 1944 during the invasion of Normandy. In World War II, the majority of American soldiers rode Harley-Davidson WLA motorcycles. The model that was shown was an anachronism since it had not yet been created. The gearheads and historians will note this feature, which is quite insignificant. The film, directed by Spielberg, is praised for its depiction of historical events, exhibits the difficulty of locating props that are faithful to the period. Although it does not deviate from the storyline, it is a factual error. It is important to maintain authenticity, even in short background situations. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Error: Azim uses a telescope centuries before it was invented. Within the realm of medieval England, Azim, portrayed by Morgan Freeman, makes use of a telescope. However, the invention of telescopes did not occur until the early 17th century. Although it takes place in the 12th century, the film is set 500 years too early. The persona of Azim is based on actual Muslim academics, but the usage of technology is all made up. For dramatic effect and to convey a sense of wizard-like knowledge, the instrument is shown. During the Middle Ages, there were crude optics, but there were no telescopes. Beyond this, historians have pointed out that the movie takes a lot of liberties. It contributes to the stereotypes of the magical foreigner. Despite being completely erroneous, the scene is remarkable. In spite of this, Azim continues to be a fan-favorite character. Ever After. Error: Solid chocolate appears before it existed. According to this reinterpretation of Cinderella, chocolate is presented in the shape of bars. However, it wasn't until the 1840s when solid chocolate was invented in Europe. The story of the movie takes place during the Renaissance, which is a significant amount of time before the invention of contemporary sweets. Chocolate was drunk during the time as a beverage that had a bitter taste. After being imported from the Americas, its usage was restricted to the most prestigious courts in Europe. A contemporary convenience that has been included for the sake of visual narrative is the bar. Anachronisms such as these combine contemporary preferences with the romanticism of the past, exudes allure, yet does not possess any historical validity. The movie has a number of time lapses, and this is one of them. For some, it is a work of fiction rather than history. Back to the Future. Error: Marty plays a guitar not yet invented. Marty McFly plays a Gibson ES-345 at a 1955 high school dance. That model wasn't released until 1958, 3 years later. It is a flashy mistake that stands out to music fans. Because it features Chuck Berry's rendition of Johnny B. Good, the scene is legendary. For the same reason, the song was not released until 1958. Marty's performance is a fantastical moment, but it is also fraught with problems with the chronology. As part of the film's humorous approach to history, this is included. In terms of both its appearance and its sound, the guitar itself was selected. Shortly after, purists became aware of the anachronism. Although it adds to the appeal, it violates the laws of music history. Pirates of the Caribbean. Error: Barbossa eats a Granny Smith apple, introduced centuries later. The iconic Captain Barbossa is shown biting on a Granny Smith apple, which has a vivid green color. In Australia, the cultivation of this apple type did not begin until the year 1868. Taking place in the early 1700s, the film takes place during the golden age of piracy. As a result, the apple is a humorous example of an anachronism. The color contrast and visual impact were probably the reasons why the producers picked it. A visual decision was made rather than an accurate one. Thus, it wasn't a mistake. Only dried meat, citrus fruits, and grog were allowed to be consumed by pirates. Although it is a remarkable scene, it is not feasible in historical terms. Barbarossa's personality is enhanced with this addition. There was a little historical error that had a significant influence on popular culture. The Informant. Error: Cars have license plates from a decade later. It is set in the early 1990s, although there are automobiles in the movie that have license plates from 2001. Probably an oversight made by the production team when they were filming the backdrop. Despite the fact the automobiles have a superficial similarity to the era, the details do not. In the state of Illinois, license plates from the year 2001 feature unique designs. Careful observers were able to identify the inconsistency. In location filmmaking, these kinds of mistakes are rather prevalent. It is still appropriate for the tone of the novel, but it disrupts the immersion in the time frame. When continuity checks are performed, license plates are often disregarded. Reviewers pointed out that this was only one of many small mistakes. However, the overarching storyline of the movie is, for the most part, factual. JFK. Error. David Ferrie confesses to conspiracy. Never happened. The film features a dramatic speech in which Ferrie admits to having been involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. In the actual world, Ferrie never admitted his guilt and eventually passed away under mysterious circumstances. Oliver Stone gave the character a dramatic portrayal in order to propel the conspiracy storyline. Despite being questioned, Ferrie denied having any information. However, natural causes were determined to be the reason of his death in 1967. In reality, the confession scenario never took place. A film is a combination of reality and speculation. Despite the fact that it distorts established facts, it aroused fresh interest in the JFK conspiracy. While Stone justified the use of artistic license, many raised objections. Although it creates drama, the scenario also conveys false information. Apocalypto. Error. Depicts Mayans performing Aztec-style sacrifices. The video depicts Mayans slicing the hearts of victims as they are perched on temples. Aztecs were more likely to engage in this activity than other people. The Mayans were known to commit ceremonial sacrifices, but not on this scale or in this manner. While the Mayans dwelt farther south, the Aztecs inhabited the central region of Mexico. For the sake of shock effect, the film distorts civilizations. These pyramids are not Mayan in appearance, rather they are Aztec in appearance. Historians have voiced their disapproval of the muddled nature of Mesoamerican customs. Gibson justified the violence by arguing that it was a metaphor. The images in the film are magnificent, yet they are culturally confusing. The narrative is more mythical than historical in nature. U-571. Error. Americans are credited with capturing the Enigma machine, actually done by the British. The movie depicts sailors from the United States Navy seizing a German U-boat and finding the Enigma machine inside of it. U-110 was the vessel that was responsible for the seizure of the first Enigma and code books in 1941 by the British Royal Navy. Later on, Americans made contributions to the Enigma project, although they were not the first. This video has been condemned by historians and veterans from the United Kingdom for distorting history. The error was brought to the attention of Prime Minister Tony Blair as well. It was revealed by the filmmakers that they had fabricated the events for the American audience. It has been argued that this undermines the information-gathering operations of the British government during times of war. The deciphering of German transmissions had already begun at Bletchley Park, where Alan Turing was based. The action in the film is exciting, but it is all made up. The true line of cryptographic discoveries that occurred during the war is misrepresented by it. The Sound of Music. Error. The Von Trapps hike over the Alps to escape. Actually took a train. The Von Trapp family makes their escape from Austria by trekking over the Alps as the movie comes to a close. As a matter of fact, they traveled from Salzburg to Italy by way of a train. They would have been able to enter Nazi Germany had they taken the journey that was shown. Despite the fact that it was less spectacular, their exit was legally strategic. The fact that Captain Von Trapp was born in Italy gave him Italian citizenship from the beginning. The film rearranged the landscape in order to create visual meaning and suspense. Later on, Maria Von Trapp made a joke about the artistic liberty afforded to the film. The true escape took place many months before the outbreak of World War II. On the other hand, the movie's theme of defiance continues to be motivational. The audience welcomed the scenario despite the fact that it was inaccurate. Anonymous. Error. Claims Edward de Vere wrote Shakespeare's plays. Widely rejected by scholars. According to the allegations made in the movie, Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford, was the real creator of Shakespeare's works. Literary historians who adhere to the mainstream school of thought do not endorse this Oxfordian theory. There is no substantial evidence that links de Vere to the works. William Shakespeare of Stratford kept records of his income, his engagement in the play, and his claims of authorship. Shakespeare's most important plays were not written until after De Vere's death in 1604. A political plot is rewritten in the film's interpretation of literal history. In the eyes of historians, it is more of a work of amusing fiction than a true narrative. The established narratives are called into question without any evidence being provided. Although the performance was acclaimed, the idea was critiqued by the critics. The legend around authorship is more important than the actual facts. Newsies. Error. Boys sing and dance during a real labor strike. Very theatrical. During the year 1899, the picture features newsboys who are singing and dancing in order to organize a spectacular strike. Although it was a genuine strike, it was far more difficult than it was depicted to be. Neither musical numbers nor coordinated demonstrations have ever been documented in history. The film takes a child labor fight and transforms it into a narrative performed on Broadway. Those who had leadership positions, such as Kid Blink, were hardly polished performers. Actual strikers were substituted to physical assaults, threats, and financial suffering. In order to make it more suitable for families, Disney scaled down the difficulty. It is the musical's vibrancy and charm that continues to make it so successful. In spite of this, it glosses over the historical difficulties of teenage work. The main message is accurate, but the manner is not. The Imitation Game. Error. Turing is blackmailed by a Soviet spy. No evidence this happened. In the movie, Alan Turing is shown to be subjected to blackmail by a Soviet spy because of his sexual orientation. There is no historical evidence that supports this storyline. In 1952, Turing was definitely found guilty of homosexuality, but the charges against him were not related to espionage. The inquiry into the heist led to the discovery of his sexual orientation. In order to create dramatic suspense, the Soviet espionage perspective was presented. Turing never communicated with any known spies throughout his life. Historians are of the opinion that this is completely needless and deceptive. The actual narrative of how code-breaking was accomplished at Bletchley Park was already rather spectacular. Although the conviction and treatment of Turing were terrible, there was no evidence of espionage involved. The film received accolades, although it was criticized for stretching the truth. Titanic again. Error. The stars are incorrectly positioned in the night sky. During the film that was released in 1997, Rose gazes up into the night sky after the Titanic has sunk. An astronomer named Neil deGrasse Tyson made the observation that the stars were positioned incorrectly. The shown sky does not correspond to the sky that would have been seen on April 15, 1912. To be more specific, the constellations and the locations of the stars were either reflective or random. The inaccuracy was brought to the attention of James Cameron by Tyson. Cameron acknowledged in a re-release that he had made a mistake and then remedied it. It was very unusual for a scientific inaccuracy to be corrected in an official capacity. Despite the fact that it had no impact on the narrative, accuracy purists were concerned about it. A detail of this kind demonstrates how even little mistakes may still get noticed. A historical truth may be found even in the sky. Braveheart, another one. Error. Isabella of France is portrayed as Wallace's lover. She was a child. A romantic relationship between William Wallace and Princess Isabella is shown in the movie. Historically speaking, Isabella was around 9 years old when Wallace passed away in the year 1305. She did not communicate with Wallace after she married Edward II, which was several years later. For the sake of creating romantic drama, the affair is entirely fictional. The true nature of Wallace's connections is still unknown. Braveheart has a number of chronological errors, including this one. Historians have described the film as being both captivating and utterly wrong. It combines centuries of struggle between the English and the Scottish into a single narrative. Mel Gibson went to great lengths to use his artistic liberty. Although it is emotionally engaging, the love tale is not based on any facts. The King's Speech. Error. Churchill is shown supporting King George VI early. He actually supported Edward VIII. Within the context of the situation that was caused by King George VI's abdication, Churchill may be seen in the film offering support to him. Throughout the course of history, Churchill has been a backer of Edward VIII's desire to continue to rule as king. He even went so far as to make a statement in Parliament in order to promote his support for Edward. On the other hand, this is changed in the movie so that Churchill is shown as a trustworthy member of the coalition. For the sake of obtaining emotional clarity, the politics we are now experiencing have been simplified. It was throughout the course of World War II that Churchill's friendship with George VI grew more intimate. At the time when he resigned from his post, he was a member of the minority that was opposed to him. There's a possibility that the filmmakers altered the historical events in order to simplify the relationships between the characters. Early on in his political career, Churchill chose a viewpoint that was somewhat more controversial. Not only is this not a faultless biography, but it is also a piece of motivational fiction. Lincoln. Error. Connecticut congressmen vote to abolish slavery. Actually, they opposed it. The state of Connecticut cast a vote in support of the 13th Amendment in the movie. According to an examination of historical documents, 3 of its 4 representatives voted against it. For the sake of narrative momentum, the film flips the previous vote. This results in a more robust perception of national unity than the actual situation. Spielberg's crew stated that they had changed this in order to make it more emotionally impactful. Even with the northern states, the actual voting was a contentious affair. Lawful or racist objections were raised by several individuals. A rewriting of history that is not just subtle, but also substantial. The yes vote that Connecticut casts in the movie is completely fictitious. There were just 2 votes needed to adopt the amendment. Every detail was important. Selma. Error. LBJ is shown resisting the Voting Rights Act. He strongly supported it. Lyndon B. Johnson, the President of the United States, is shown in the film as hesitantly backing civil rights legislation. The fact is that President Lyndon B. Johnson was a major proponent of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Additionally, he collaborated with Martin Luther King Jr. and delivered eloquent speeches. He is portrayed in the movie as a stumbling block in order to emphasize King's bravery. This, historians argue, distorts their actual affiliation with one another. The stress was ratcheted up for dramatic effect rather than for realism. Although LBJ was profoundly dedicated, he was motivated by political causes. Only a few short months after the Selma March, he actually signed the legislation. Despite the fact that the film's depiction of LBJ is controversial, the film's emotional beats are powerful. In this instance, the reality is being reshaped by a theatrical story. Troy. Again. Error. Achilles uses a sword design that didn't exist in the Bronze Age. Achilles' blade has a fuller, which is a groove that allows blood to circulate and maintains balance. In the centuries that followed the Bronze Age, this design was finally put into practice. Around the year 1200 BCE, the film takes place during the early Mycenaean period of conflict. The actual weapons used during the Bronze Age were short, fashioned like leaves, and lacked fullers. In appearance, Achilles' armor is more Mycenaean than it is medieval. It's possible that designers put aesthetics ahead of accuracy in their work. One further indication that Troy's chronology is muddled and that his background is complicated. Inconsistency was promptly brought to the attention of weapon professionals. It is a historical mismatch, despite the fact that it is visually engaging. It was only fitting that the famous warrior be armed with a genuine sword from the Bronze Age. The Dark Knight Rises. Error. Bane's voice noticeably changes between scenes due to post-production edits. Bane's voice is very variable. In some instances, it is deep and muffled, while in others, it is sharp. In the beginning, the character had a sound that was far more distorted. Following the first showing, the crowd had a difficult time comprehending him. Following the completion of shooting, Christopher Nolan made adjustments to the audio mix. As a consequence of this, Bane's voice shifts from one scene to the next. Audiences are left perplexed, and continuity is broken. Although the quality of the voice increased, the consistency worsened. A number of enthusiasts favored the earlier version, which was spooky. The change made the website more accessible, but it also revealed editing seams. In a very unusual instance, the input from the test audience was used to influence the final product. The Other Boleyn Girl. Error. Anne Boleyn is shown with her brother after her marriage. He died earlier. As shown in the movie, George Boleyn is still alive throughout Anne's reign as queen. In the year 1536, George and Anne were both put to death by execution. Contrary to what the movie suggests, he did have a role in her subsequent private life. Both the rumors of incest and the court intrigue are exaggerated and dramatized in the novel. The date is inaccurate, but the siblings were quite near to one another. The demise of Anne occurred very rapidly, and George's destiny was intertwined with hers. Real chronology is distorted by scenes with George that take place after her marriage. Some historians believe that the movie is more based on fiction than it is on actuality. The film prioritizes controversy above truth in its narrative. The Tudor time frame is altered, but the drama is increased. The Da Vinci Code. Error. The Louvre Pyramid is said to have 666 glass panes. It actually has 673. The protagonists in the movie assert that the pyramid has 666 windows, which they refer to as the number of the beast. 673 glass panes are included in the actual Louvre Pyramid. Not architecture, but rather conspiracy ideas are the source of the myth. Architect I.M. Pei, who hails from France, has verified the precise figure. In order to bolster its premise about a hidden organization, the movie makes use of the number. This is not a factual exaggeration. Rather, it is a symbolic one. After the film was released, both fans and skeptics conducted study on the number of panes. However, the truth was undercut by the bogus number, which increased mystery. While the pyramid continues to be a masterpiece, it is not a secret message. This fact check turned out to be one of the most disproved statements made in the movie. The Great Gatsby, 2013. Error. Gatsby drives a 1929 Duesenberg. The film is set in 1922. One can observe Jay Gatsby driving a bright yellow 1929 Duesenberg Model J while he is out and about. The story takes place during the summer of 1922, which is 7 years prior to the release of the automobile. Not until much later in the decade did the Duesenberg end up becoming a status symbol. The flashy model was most likely selected by the filmmakers in order to highlight Gatsby's wealth and panache. Historically speaking, it is possible that Gatsby drove a Pierce Arrow or a Rolls-Royce in the year 1922. Visual flair is added by the car's design, but period accuracy is compromised as a result. Automobile enthusiasts were quick to notice the inconsistency. Baz Luhrmann, the director, always put an emphasis on spectacle rather than strict authenticity. The vehicle became a symbol of the movie, despite the fact that it was out of date at the time. A classic example of cinematic style, triumphing over historical fact, this film is a masterpiece. The King's Man. Error. The Treaty of Versailles is signed in the wrong room. Historically inaccurate. In the movie, the signing of the Treaty of Versailles takes place in a large and dramatic setting. The Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles was the location where the document was signed historically. The European border was redrawn. Following the conclusion of World War I, the treaty redrew the borders of Europe. Due to cinematic considerations, the film takes place in a different theater. Although it appears to be a grand location, the location is deceptive. 1919 saw the selection of the Hall of Mirrors as a manner of symbolic retaliation against Germany. The modification has an effect on the historical significance of the actual event. Although the audience might not have noticed, historians did. Details of the location are important when depicting moments that change the world. For the sake of visual convenience, the choice made by the film loses its symbolic weight. The Notebook. Error. Noah's house has modern electrical outlets, not accurate for the 1940s. Contemporary electrical outlets in the shape of rectangles can be found in Noah's renovated plantation home. In the early 1940s, when push-button outlets and round outlets were the norm, the events of the film take place. This is a minor detail that is easy to overlook, but it undermines the authenticity of the period. Interiors that are relevant to the time period are essential for historical romances. It's likely that the error was caused by the use of contemporary shooting locations. A visual shortcut that undermines the timeline of the film is being introduced here. Fans who pay close attention to detail were able to spot the inconsistency. Because the house is such a significant setting, the error is brought to the forefront. The use of contemporary props in historical narratives helps to remove viewers from the time period. The love story, rather than the wiring, is what most viewers find moving about the film. The Green Mile. Error. Paul Edgecombe watches a movie released in 1935. The scene is set in 1932. Edgecombe enjoys watching Top Hat, a film starring Fred Astaire that was released in 1935. However, the events depicted in the movie take place in 1932, which is 3 years back. This scene is out of sync, but it adds a touch of period feel and charm to the story. The anachronism is not significant, but it is noticeable to those who are interested in films. Up until that point, Top Hat had not even started the production process. In order to properly align their cultural references, period films need to be careful. It is likely that director Frank Darabont selected the film because of its emotional tone. Although there was a date error, the music and romance were appropriate for the story. One of the many historical blunders that occur in the movie is this one. Mood and emotion take precedence over accuracy in this situation. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Error. A hurricane is shown hitting New Orleans in 2005. It actually occurred in 2008. The film makes use of Hurricane Katrina as a framing device throughout its entirety. The movie gives the impression that the storm occurs in 2005 when Daisy is in her final days. The fictional timeline used by Benjamin Button, on the other hand, does not correspond with this date. The story jumps around, blending elements of fantasy and non-fictional occurrences. Inconsistent with the data from 2005, the hospital scenes showed preparations for the hurricane. Both the severity of the storm's damage and the timelines behind it are unclear. Both the timelines and the landmarks of New Orleans are shortened for dramatic effect. The misalignment of fact and fiction is not overt, but it is significant nonetheless. Katrina was most likely used as a metaphor by the filmmakers, a result that is emotional but jumbled with historical information. The Greatest Showman, again. Error. Jenny Lind is portrayed as a romantic interest. No such relationship existed. A romantic relationship between P.T. Barnum and the singer Jenny Lind is hinted at in the movie. Despite appearances, their relationship was entirely professional in nature. Barnum's tour was terminated by Lind as a result of personal disagreements and financial disagreements. Even though it adds tension, the fabricated romance is not grounded in reality. There is no evidence of any romantic or scandalous relationship between them. Lind was a woman who was known for her integrity and modesty. Some people believe that the subplot is detrimental to her legacy. Adding romance to a situation where none previously existed is a Hollywood trope. This embellishment was not necessary for the true story of Barnum. Even though it is dramatic, the love angle is completely fabricated. The Queen. Error. Tony Blair is shown driving a car with a 2006 registration. The film is set in 1997. A scene depicts Prime Minister Tony Blair driving a vehicle that has license plates from the year 2006. The events of the story take place after the passing of Princess Diana in 1997. In the United Kingdom, the coding system for registration plates is very stringent. People who were paying close attention immediately noticed the mistake. A registration that was issued in 1997 or earlier should have been on the vehicle. It's a minor production oversight, but it could have been avoided. In the course of production, the scene was shot with a contemporary vehicle, which went unnoticed. It undermines the period accuracy that was otherwise carefully considered. The remaining portions of the movie continue to be respectful and detailed. Although it may appear to be insignificant, a license plate is a sign of attention to detail. The Imitation Game again. Error. Turing's machine is called Christopher. No evidence he named it that. Christopher is the name that Alan Turing gives to his digital computer in the movie. This heartfelt gesture creates a connection to a childhood friend that he has since lost. On the other hand, there is no evidence that he ever gave his bomb machine a name. It was highly unlikely that Turing would make it sentimental because he was extremely private. The machine was referred to by its simple name, the bomb. The addition of the name Christopher is added for dramatic effect. The film blends real-life events with narratives that are emotionally engaging. With this choice, Turing is given a human face, but truth is stretched. There is a risk of romanticizing complicated events, according to historians. Warmth is added, but the important technical history is fictionalized as a result. The Theory of Everything. Error. Stephen Hawking receives his PhD before his diagnosis. This is reversed in the film. The film depicts Stephen Hawking receiving his doctorate and then being diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. In actuality, he was diagnosed in 1963, which was prior to the completion of his doctoral studies. The emotional weight of his early struggle is lessened as a result of the misorganization. After adjusting to his ALS, Stephen Hawking received his doctorate in 1966. In order to achieve a more dramatic effect, the film shortens his timeline. Medically speaking, his early years with Jane were more difficult than they appear to have been. In spite of this, the movie manages to capture his tenacity and intelligence. A few of the facts were rearranged in order to improve the flow of the story. Inaccuracies were pointed out by critics, but they lauded the performances nonetheless. It is motivational, but it is not a perfect biographical account. Elizabeth, the Golden Age. Error. The Spanish Armada is shown attacking England directly. They never landed. During the year 1588, Spanish ships are shown in the movie storming the coast of England. As a matter of fact, the Armada never made landfall. At sea, the English Navy engaged them, and the weather caused their fleet to become dispersed. There was a significant danger, but there was no actual invasion that took place. Action is added to the film through the use of cannon battles and land fear. The speech that Queen Elizabeth gave at Tilbury was made in reality, but Spanish troops never set foot on English soil. The country's anxiety is portrayed in the movie as a violent conflict. Although they acknowledged the tension, historians do not agree with the portrayal. As a result of the storm and the British defenses, the Armada was defeated. Although it is exciting, it is not accurate geographically. The Revenant again. Error. Glass eats raw bison liver. He would have cooked it to avoid parasites. As a means of subsistence, Hugh Glass consumes raw bison liver in the movie. It's a shocking and traumatic scene, but it's also dangerous from a medical standpoint. Tapeworms and other parasites can be transmitted through the consumption of raw animal organs in the wild. There is a good chance that the mountain men like Glass would have cooked their food whenever it was possible. Fire was necessary for survival, not only for keeping warm, but also for ensuring the safety of food. The actual Hugh Glass did, in fact, go through a lot of trouble after being attacked by a bear. Nevertheless, there is no evidence in the past that he consumed liver in its raw form. In order to achieve greater emotional intensity and realism, the scene was added. It is true that Leonardo DiCaprio consumed a real liver while filming the movie. The presentation is striking to the eye, but it is not historically or medically sound. The Danish Girl. Error. Lily Elba undergoes surgery in 1930. The film shows it happening earlier. The timeline of Lily Elba's transition from male to female is shortened in the film. Beginning in 1930, she underwent a number of surgical procedures before passing away in 1931. Because of the movie, it appears as though all of the procedures took place earlier. Moreover, it suggests that there is an immediate emotional closure, which was not the case. For many years, Lily struggled with both emotional and physical difficulties. According to historical letters, she had a greater amount of internal conflict than was shown. Her last operation, a uterus transplant, was a risky and ultimately unsuccessful procedure. The film combines events for the sake of flow rather than accuracy. The bravery that Lily displayed was genuine, but her journey was more difficult and took longer. A life story that is extremely complex is simplified by the shift in timeline. The Iron Lady. Error. Thatcher is shown voting on the Falklands War. Prime ministers don't vote. In one of the scenes, in a cabinet vote, Margaret Thatcher raises her hand. In actuality, British prime ministers do not have a vote in the decisions that are made by cabinet. Rather than voting formally, they take the lead in discussions, work to build consensus, and declare policy. This serves to heighten the drama that occurs during the decision regarding the Falkland Islands. It was a private and unofficial vote that took place behind closed doors. There is a misunderstanding of the procedure followed by the UK Parliament. It gives the impression of a democracy similar to that of the United States, which the United Kingdom does not adhere to, but not in the way that was depicted. Thatcher's role was authoritative. Complex political maneuvering is oversimplified as a result of the mistake. Extremely dramatic, but not in accordance with the Constitution. The Aviator again. Error. Hughes watches a movie that hadn't been released yet. It was seen that Howard Hughes was shooting movies in an atypical order. In one scene, he was shown watching Hell's Angels even before it was officially released in 1930. In addition to that, he was seen watching rushes of later films before they were ready. These scenes were intentionally included to highlight his obsession with details. But the movies shown do not match the timeline of the actual release dates of those movies. Hughes worked on the Hell's Angels for years to rectify and remove the imperfections, but not as shown here. Through the use of pacing, the film condenses projects. The chronology of his career becomes muddled as a result of this. The real Howard behaved in a methodical manner and was not miraculously ahead of schedule. In this case, style is more important than strict sequence. The Post. Error. The Supreme Court building shown wasn't completed until after the events. In the movie, the Supreme Court was shown as it is now. However, the real incident occurred in 1971 in the course of the Pentagon Papers investigation. The building shown in the scene was finished building in 1935, but some scenes were filmed in today's era. The filmmakers made use of both stock sets and replica sets. Nevertheless, there are a few interior details that date back to the early 1970s. The featured courtrooms have layouts and technology that date back to later decades. Because of this, historical immersion is subtly impacted. The conclusion of the case is based on actual events, but the visuals are partially fictitious. Although the timeline is accurate for the most part, the visuals are off. Most audiences were unaware of this, but legal historians were aware of it. The Favorite. Error. Queen Anne's rabbits represent her lost children. She had none named. Queen Anne was shown in the movie to keep 17 rabbits, one for each child who was lost. Many claimed Anne lost about 17 children and she suffered several miscarriages and the loss of children. However, no record proves that she had rabbits or named them after her children. The rabbits are not factual, just symbolic. They provided Yorgos Lanthimos, the director, with a sense of emotional depth. Anne's actual health was precarious, and she was profoundly impacted by the loss of a loved one. However, the rabbit fact is completely a work of fiction. Although it is emotionally evocative, it does not have any historical foundation. Both absurdity and stylization are prevalent throughout the film, a work of art fiction that is only tangentially based on royal grief. The Man in the Iron Mask. Error. Musketeers use flintlock pistols. Those were invented decades later. In the film, which takes place in the 1660s, musketeers are seen working with flintlock pistols. Flintlocks did not become commonplace until the latter half of the 17th century. There is a good chance that the real musketeers used either matchlock or wheel-lock firearms. Within the early 1700s, the use of flintlocks became widespread. By the time period, the weapons depicted in the movie are contemporary. Filmmakers selected them because of their simplicity and consistency in appearance. Due to the fact that they appear to be familiar, audiences accept them. Throughout the course of history, they are at least 40 years out of place. The design of the weapon is important for period accuracy. There was no mistake in taking this shortcut. It was done on purpose.
If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon